ready to rock and roll.
Thanks very much for joining us. Walter Cutler is now with us. He is the former ambassador to Saudi Arabia. Thank you for being with us.
Good morning.
Let's first talk about our relations with Saudi Arabia and what has appeared to be, I don't know if this is a right way to say it, on again, off again, as far as Saudi Arabia's support in any military action that would take place in that part of the world. What is the history of our relation with this country?
Well, the history is pretty close over the years. I think the Gulf War is an example of how we can come together when our mutual interests require it. We're facing another such situation that is very different. But I think to say on again, off again is perhaps a bit of an exaggeration. We are approaching a point where we'll have to have some understandings, and as you know, Secretary Rumsfeld has just been there.
Why did he go, and in what appeared to have been a last-minute decision for him to travel to Saudi Arabia and a number of other countries, including Egypt?
Well, I don't know how last minute it was, but obviously we are preparing to do whatever is necessary. And Saudi Arabia, along with the other countries he's visiting, will probably play key roles.
What role would Saudi Arabia play?
Well, that's to be determined. I think what role Saudi Arabia plays depends really on how we decide to handle this crisis, and I don't think we've quite reached that point. People talk about sending in military forces, and yet there may be other ways to handle, other conventional ways to handle this very unconventional situation. So I think that remains to be seen.
How much time did you spend over there?
I was there almost 5 years. It was in the 80s. During the Iran-Iraq War, when we had a lot of security concerns in the area, and then I've been back at least once a year since.
We have 2 phone lines set aside for Ambassador Cutler if you live in the Eastern, Central, Mountain, or Pacific time zones. We have another line set aside if you're Arab American, 202-628-0205. What kind of government is in Saudi Arabia?
Well, it's a monarchy. It's the King Fahd is the head of the government. It's the Al Saud family, which brought the country together in the 1930s. And King Fahd, of course, has been ill, and Crown Prince Abdullah, over the last 3 years, has taken over more and more of the decision-making.
When Donald Rumsfeld met with him yesterday, what did they talk about? What's your sense of what had to be on the agenda?
Well, I think some things are pretty obvious. Obviously, they're talking probably exclusively about how to handle this situation, which affects the Saudis, really, as much as it does us. They are in the area. They have experienced terrorism, and they've made it very clear that they're going to be with us on this. Just how they're going to be with us, I don't think has been sorted out yet.
Let me show you what the Wall Street Journal is saying this morning, front page. At the heart of the conflict between the U.S. and Osama bin Laden is an epic struggle over one of the world's richest prizes, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. Home to 25% of the world's proven oil reserves, Saudi Arabia now faces one of the greatest threats ever to its stability. The ruling dynasty's 2 pillars of support are increasingly at odds: a military alliance with the U.S. and a religious alliance with a deeply conservative strain of Islam determined to rid the land of foreign influence. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, I think that reflects the basic dilemma which has faced the Saudi leaders, frankly, ever since the Second World War, put it that way. How to protect this vast land with a small population and its oil, which is important not only to them but to us. I sometimes think that the Saudis are both blessed and cursed. They're blessed with this oil, but they're cursed because there are a lot of predators out there who would like it. And the religious establishment, of course, would like to see Saudi sovereignty and this home of Islam free as much as possible of any kind of foreign military occupation or presence. And I think we have to realize what they put up with when, during the Gulf War, 500,000 Americans or other non-Muslims came in and operated out of their territory. This undoubtedly was one of the toughest decisions they made, but their whole security was at stake. This time, the Saudis are not faced with Iraqi tanks, but still, They know that terrorism is just as much of a threat to them as it is to us.
I'm going to go back to this Time magazine map, and you may have answered my next question, but we did have U.S. troops in Saudi Arabia. There's been talk of U.S. troops in Saudi Arabia. Right now, the policy of the Saudi government is what?
With regard to American troops? Well, that's the question right now. Yes, we've had troops in there for decades training the Saudis. We've had an enhanced military presence since the Gulf War because Saddam Hussein is still up there and still a threat to the region and a threat to the flow of oil. Now the question is, to what extent will Saudi Arabia actually be needed in whatever it is we decide to do? And I think that's the question. We haven't yet decided how to handle this. We are making preparations. There are many contingencies. Just how we do it will really be the determining factor of how much we want the Saudis to get involved.
Can you provide an overview of the country, how many American businesses do business in Saudi Arabia, the population, its geography? You talked earlier about the government, its size.
Yeah, Saudi Arabia is huge with a small population. The population probably is something over 20 million people. There are probably 4 to 5 million foreign workers there. But the population is increasing rapidly. One of the highest population growth in the world, actually, and this poses a problem. For the first time, the Saudis have significant unemployment. And with almost a decade of oil prices being low, the government has not been able to look after to run this social welfare state, if you will, as readily as it has in the past. American business, 25 to 30,000 Americans working in Saudi Arabia.
And you became ambassador, you were a career diplomat, correct?
I was a career diplomat.
And you're now president of Meridian International Center, which is what?
That's a non-profit organization headquartered in Washington. Its mission is the promotion of international understanding through a wide variety of professional exchange programs and other activities. I've been there since I left the Foreign Service.
Walter Cutler served as the U.S. ambassador to Saudi Arabia between 1984 and 1987, and again in the late 80s between 88 and 89. Let's get a call from Flagstaff, Arizona. Good morning.
Good morning. I was just wondering if, I heard that Sudan offered to give Saudi Arabia bin Laden to them, and then they rejected taking him. And now, if we had, say, the Rockefeller family had a black sheep, and he had did something similar to bin Laden, and some other country offered to give him to us. Is it because he comes from a wealthy family or something?
Thanks for the call.
Well, I've seen that report, and I can't say that I know much more about it than what you've read. It is true that bin Laden was induced to leave Sudan and had to go to Afghanistan, and there's no question that the Saudis were helpful in that. The bin Laden family, and this is really something that should be underscored, the bin Laden family is a large family, a distinguished family, and this is in fact the black sheep of the family. This is the wayward son, and the family has essentially disowned him as the government has taken away his citizenship. But the bin Laden family, it goes on. As a matter of fact, it's interesting that the recent renovations of the two holy mosques, Mecca and Medina, were carried out in large measure by the bin Laden construction company. So it's in the Saudi mind, there's a great distinction between the bin Laden family and all the enterprises. And many U.S. companies have relations with the bin Laden companies and Osama bin Laden.
Next call, Westfield, Massachusetts, for Ambassador Cutler. Good morning.
Hi. I'm an aircraft machinist, and I build weapons of war. And we've been doing it for 5 years. You've been stockpiling like crazy. You can't tell me that you didn't know something was in the wind.
Thanks, caller.
Yeah, since the Gulf War, our what we call prepositioning of material, military equipment, throughout the Gulf has continued. This is in case there's another emergency, primarily with respect to Iraq. And we've had good cooperation not only from Saudi Arabia, but the other Gulf countries.
It's been reported that Saudi leaders have been meeting with the Muslim clerical leaders in Saudi Arabia, that they would not be directly involved in attacking another Muslim state. Why is that? What's the religious history behind that?
Well, you have to realize that Saudi Arabia is not only Muslim, but it is the home of Islam. And the clerical establishment is strong, as one would expect.
What is Islam?
Well, what is Islam? Well, the term Islam, there are various definitions of it, but it is essentially obedience. It is the worship of one God, just as other religions that we know have one God. But Islam is, in Saudi Arabia, is a way of life. It is not a matter that you go to the mosque once a week and so on. Islam pervades the life. And it also, there's no distinction between a secular government and the clerical institutions. It is all the same. So it is embedded in almost everything that the Saudis do. It is some are more devout than others, just as in this country. But Islam is in fact the religion, the national religion. There are no other religions practiced there, and it is something that all Saudis are Muslims.
So the underpinnings of this for the Saudi leaders to say we're not going to attack another Muslim state stem from what?
Well, therein lies the problem. The Gulf War, that happened because the Iraqi tanks were right at the border. They'd overrun Kuwait. They were about to. They could have come down. The country of Saudi Arabia was in jeopardy.
And again,
yes.
Go back to the Time magazine map,
Yeah.
so people have an understanding of the area that we're talking about.
So what happened was that the alliance that was formed, headed by the United States, moved in troops, and in fact we used this very holy Muslim territory to attack a fellow Muslim country. And that is something that was very unusual. It was something very difficult for the Saudis to accept, but they had no choice. So I think that since then, there has been a tendency to avoid having their soil used, particularly by non-Muslims, to attack a fellow Muslim state. And for example, when we overfly Iraq, patrolling the no-fly zones, those planes may come out of Saudi Arabia, but if we have to strike, that's usually done from our own forces in the Gulf, not from Saudi Arabia. And this is an issue right now.
Next call from California. Good morning for Ambassador Walter Cutler, who served as the U.S. ambassador in the 1980s to Saudi Arabia. Good morning.
I appreciate the work that C-SPAN is doing and the ambassador has been doing in informing the public. My question is, when the American and European oil companies went in and developed these oil fields and built refineries, don't you think that this money now that the Arabs are receiving is being used to finance the terrorism in the world?
Well, that's a good question, because there's no doubt that this oil wealth, one way or another, has helped certainly Osama bin Laden. He came, of course, from a wealthy family, and I'm sure that over the years there's a fair amount of money that has flowed in the direction, particularly during the 80s, when you had not only Osama bin Laden, but a lot of other Muslims in Afghanistan fighting the war against the Soviets to get them out of Afghanistan. So all I could say is that while there may have been, and maybe now, some flow of money from the oil-rich states to elements that become terrorists or use it for terrorist purposes, it is certainly not the policy of the governments. And in fact, these governments are now cooperating with us in trying to stem any such flow.
We go back to the Wall Street Journal piece this morning that talks about U.S.-Saudi relations, pointing out that Saudi Arabia's special ties to the United States date back to the end of World War II. That's when Franklin Roosevelt and later Harry Truman and Saudi Arabia's founder, King Abd Aziz, reached a basic understanding that the U.S. would protect the Saudi royal family that runs the country in return for preferred access to Saudi oil. Next call is from Cleveland. Good morning.
Yeah, hi, this is Mike. I'm Lebanese, and just wondering why the media hasn't focused more on the Hezbollah group with their ties, and they do have close ties to the Al-Qaeda organization, and a few theories are involved where there was some high-ranking Hezbollah officials implicated in the attack on Washington and New York. Thank you.
Thank you, caller.
Well, I think he's right. The focus has been on Al-Qaeda and not on some of the other terrorist organizations that undoubtedly have one degree or another of a relationship with Al-Qaeda, Hezbollah being one. Our media, as you know, tend to focus on the crisis at hand, and there's been a lot of personalization of this, and which I think, incidentally, it should be avoided. We're talking about a network that is very shady, very difficult to unravel, and it's not just one person. And as somebody said, we may get Osama bin Laden, but and this I want to stress: the way we get him may determine whether or not we create others, because it's not just one person. Right now, I think he serves as a motivating factor. But there are the related organizations, and I have no doubt that in our contingency planning, looking down the road, this is a long-term operation. We're talking about years here. Just these other organizations that may engage in terrorism will certainly be on our screen.
Kilgore, Texas, you're next. Good morning.
Yes. In 1998, the Saudi Arabian National Oil Company, in partnership with 7 other companies, including Union Oil of California, signed an agreement with the Taliban to build oil and gas pipelines from Turkmenistan, which has the largest gas field in the world and is on the border of Afghanistan, down through Afghanistan, through to Pakistan, and to unload this oil on the tankers at the Arabian Gulf. Now, Afghanistan is important only because of its location. The American people need to understand that this is all about oil politics, all about getting that abundant oil and gas out of Central Asia down to the Gulf of Oman. Thank you.
Thank you, caller.
I suspect our caller knows more about this particular project than I do. I've read reports of this, but this is a development since I was looking at that area.
When was the last time you visited Saudi Arabia?
I go usually once a year at least.
Is there an American influence in the country?
Oh yes, inevitably. But that's the constant challenge to both the American business community out there as well as the Saudis, and that is our cultures are extremely different, and yet we have this close relationship. But this requires cross-cultural sensitivity all the time, because we are really so different, and yet we have common interests and common concerns. And as you mentioned, with ups and downs, well, right now we are having a particular concern because of the crisis at hand. But yes, you go to Saudi Arabia, and you will find our various McDonald's and everything like that. There's almost everything there, and yet this is on the surface. But below the surface is this very strong culture and religion. And I think it's easy sometimes to forget that. You go out there and you say, my gosh, some of this looks just like downtown USA. But it really is not quite that way.
Next, Alexandria, Virginia. Good morning.
Hi, good morning. I'd like to ask the ambassador, while he was the ambassador, did he meet with the bin Laden group ever officially?
Not officially. The bin Ladens, undoubtedly, I've met with a lot of bin Ladens because there are so many of them. And I knew for a time Salim bin Laden, and he was one of the sons who he took over the company for a while. He himself was killed in an airplane accident in our country. And but did I have any official dealings with the bin Ladens? Only in respect of supporting American business.
Lincoln, Nebraska, good morning.
Hi, good morning. This is Adil. I hope that Mr. Ambassador give us a brief description about the differences between Wahhabi sect, that is the predominant Islamic sect in Saudi Arabia, and what's the differences between the tenets of this sect from other Sunni and Shia factions. Thank you.
Are you familiar with the various sects in the country?
Well, I think we'd need a lot of time to get into that question to do it justice. Let me just make one or two general points. Wahhabism is a very conservative version of Islam, and compared to some other Muslim states. The thing that Americans must understand is Islam takes many forms. There are certain basics, of course, but it varies in practice widely from country to country. I lived, for example, in Tunisia, and the way that Islam is practiced there is quite different. In Saudi Arabia, it even varies within the country. There's the framework, and that's solid, and everybody is a Muslim. But just as in our country, where you may have Christians of varying degrees, some let's say more devout than others, so throughout the Muslim world, that's it. But Saudi Arabia has this special place, and when I was there in the 80s, the King Fahd, adopted the title as the custodian of the two holy mosques, Mecca and Medina. And while some Western skeptics may have thought, well, this is a bit of PR, not at all. That's taken very seriously. The Saudis do have the responsibility of creating a stable environment for the practice of Islam, and there, as you know, there are millions of Muslims from throughout the world who come to Saudi Arabia, make the Hajj, the pilgrimage, visit Medina, and this is a huge responsibility that's taken very seriously.
We're going to go back to this map if you can explain where that's located.
The Mecca and Medina are over on the western side of the country here. Mecca is not far from Jeddah, which is the principal port on the Red Sea. And then to the north, not too far away, is Medina.
Next call is from Indianapolis. Good morning.
Good morning. This is Daleen from Indianapolis, and I just wanted to comment on a earlier reading you had, which was about, I think it was from Ralph Nader. But I just hope we all learn a lesson from what's happened over the last few years, and I'm speaking bipartisanly. All of our attention, including, readers of newspapers, radio listeners, TV watchers, the government, the attorneys, the media, I mean, the whole world was focused on scandal. And they caught us with our pants down. And it's also trivia. The world was listening to us and laughing at us, and all the while, bin Laden had all this time to create his little networks all over the world. So I just pray that, we find a way to put our priorities in perspective.
Thanks, caller. We'll move on to Virginia Beach. Good morning.
Good morning. I'm from Virginia Beach. I'm a citizen here, and my question is, why is the newsreel have given such detailed information about our ships and our airplanes and our fighting planes? They've given tours around. To me, my idea is that they're laying a roadmap out for the terrorists.
Thanks, caller. I was looking, I have it here somewhere. There's a front page article in the Washington Times that basically outlines what is being described as surgical strikes within Afghanistan, going after the targets that are viewed as the terrorist camps of Osama bin Laden, and avoiding the electrical grids and other support infrastructure that keeps the Afghan country moving.
Well, yeah, and this, frankly, I'm reassured that our government has taken as long as it has to react in any physical way, because this is not an easy situation, and I think that I would rather see our country be clever than macho. We will do what we have to do, but there are various ways, and some of them require a lot of very confidential dealings with elements out in that area.
But the caller's point in
Yeah.
Mrs. Rowan Scarborough's article, he says that the center of gravity is not the bridges, it's the Taliban, said one administration official, using the military's term for an enemy target. Are we basically saying, here's where we're going?
Well, I think, put it this way, the less damage we do to the infrastructure of the country, and certainly the less damage and the fewer casualties we inflict on civilian populations, the more support we're going to get from that part of the world. If they see us as not being careful in this respect, then I think we're going to have more problems out there.
La Plante, Florida. Next caller for former Ambassador Walter Cutler. Good morning. Caller, we're getting some feedback, so turn the volume down.
Good morning. Caller, we're getting some feedback.
And we'll put you on hold, and we'll go on to another call. Tampa, Florida, good morning.
Hi, good morning. I had a comment for the show.
Go ahead, please. You're on the air. Go ahead.
Oh, hi. Gosh, you caught me off guard there. I'm sorry. In reference to the ambassador there, I heard him say earlier that in Saudi Arabia there's no other religion other than Islam. And I'm wondering, because I've seen in the past the United States government, like the State Department or whatnot, criticize like France, Germany for religious discrimination or whatnot against minority religions. And do you think that would ever become a topic in Saudi Arabia, you know, with the U.S. providing support or whatnot? Or is that something like, is it pretty much that everybody in Saudi Arabia is just happy practicing Islam? Are there no other faiths, you know, even possibly springing up or whatnot?
Thanks, caller.
Well, it has been an issue, and it's an ongoing issue. It's one that our two governments have talked about, and that is to what extent. Don't forget, you've got a very large population of people who are not Muslims. They're brought in from other countries, and we have a large American community, and the whole question of the practice of religion, of other religions in that country, has been very much under discussion over the course of time. Put it this way, I think that it's a matter of appearance, it's a matter of what one does privately as opposed to doing publicly. And certainly in private, the observance of other religions is permitted. But you don't find churches in Saudi Arabia, as incidentally you can find in certain other Muslim countries. This is reflection of the depth and importance of Islam, in particular in Saudi Arabia.
Our guest is Walter Cutler, who served as the Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for Congressional Relations, is a career Foreign Service officer. How many years?
You really want to know? 32.
And is currently the president of the Meridian International Center. He's a graduate, by the way, of the Fletcher School for International Law and Diplomacy. Let's go back to the caller in La Plante. Have you turned the volume down?
Hello?
Go ahead.
Hello?
We can hear you.
Good morning. I'm very disappointed that a gentleman who had been in the diplomatic service for that long, you know, give this kind of unclear understanding of the area. Okay, as a Muslim, I do not like communism. You get 1 million Russian communists going in the area there, and we arm them with our tax money and have them kill the population, occupy the land there and kill our Holy Land and the Christian Holy Land and the Jewish Holy Land. Then they go in this caller who talked about Lebanon. and about Hezbollah. For 22 years, those Russian communists, in my mind, I have no problem with Jews. I have no problem with, as a matter of fact, all by lawyers, physicians, all of them, and neighbors are Jews, and we love them very, very much. Okay, you get those million communist people who are there. They go occupy Lebanon for 22 years. They kill population. They destroy the land. They destroy the infrastructure.
Caller, do you have a question?
Yes. My question is the definition of terrorism.
Thanks, caller. How do you define it?
Well, there are many definitions, but it's the indiscriminate killing and destruction of totally innocent civilians, not targeted against a specific person or element. And we saw that in New York. Didn't matter who was there. Didn't matter who was there.
Red Hook, New York. You're next for Walter Cutler.
Good morning. I'm calling to ask why the United States and the American public put up with Saudi Arabia not taking back from the Sudanese when they offered us. So in, I think it was 1996 or 1998. Why did we not have more of a tantrum over that, since we already knew he was behind the first bombing at the World Trade Center?
Thanks, caller. Second call on this. Rush Limbaugh writes about it this morning, saying that the Clinton administration should have done more. As you may have read some investigative stories earlier in the week pointing out that there were some missed opportunities to get Osama bin Laden.
Well, I've seen those reports, and as I said to the first caller, I wasn't in the government at that time. I really don't know the details of that. I think I've seen the same reports, and frankly, that's as far as I can go.
Ann Arbor, Michigan, you're next. Good morning.
Hi. I'm trying to figure out or wondering whether bin Laden's group is somehow related to the Palestinian organization or PLOs, and if so, it just seems to me that it seems like a PLO organization that might have done this in response to U.S. backing the Israel state and exiling the Palestinian race.
Thanks, caller.
Again, I think a lot, we don't know everything, but let me underscore one point, and that is that Osama bin Laden's main focus, of course, is on getting rid of U.S. military presence in the Gulf area. He's focused on the American military presence in the Muslim land of Saudi Arabia. And by extension, he would not approve of the current government in Saudi Arabia for allowing this to happen. That's his focus. Now, when it comes to the Palestinian problem, the extent that there's a direct relationship, I think, has yet to be determined. The one thing I can say is that his main focus and motivation does not seem to be on supporting the Palestinians in their conflict with the Israelis. However, there's no question that that is part of the mix. And some of the reaction, the concern about some of the appeal, put it that way, of Osama bin Laden relates to this issue, because the people in the Middle East generally feel pretty strongly about the Palestinian issue and our own policy, which they feel is not sufficiently balanced.
Dearborn Heights, Michigan, good morning. You're on C-SPAN. Go ahead.
Good morning. My name is Nala Hamdan. I'm from Dearborn Heights. I'd like to ask you about Arabic people profiling. I have a problem with McBay when he did in Oklahoma City. How come nobody went after the Christians? Nobody did anything about he's a terrorist and all the Christians are terrorists. I mean, why a bunch of fanatic Muslims and we have to pay for that?
Is there a connection?
Well, I think the caller has made an interesting point, because, you know, there is this tendency to equate terrorism with people in the Middle East, and I think that the Oklahoma City incident was a tragic but perhaps needed reminder that terrorism is not confined to that part of the world by any means. And as we all recall, the immediate reaction by some after Oklahoma City was to look for a Middle East connection, and it wasn't there, The caller's question is why don't we react the same way perhaps to Christian extremists as we do perhaps to Islamic radicals, is a fair one to ask. I don't have the answer to it, but all I can say is that let's all be careful. 99.999% of the people in the Middle East are just as appalled by what's happened in New York and Washington as we are. The Arab American community in the United States, of course, has come under pressure. But I think, frankly, our own government and others around the country are sensitive to that, and I hope the caller would agree that a fair amount of progress has been made in the last 3 weeks in trying to divide this view that terrorism is one thing, loyal Arab Americans and most of the people throughout the Middle East are with us.
In addition to serving as our ambassador to Saudi Arabia, Walter Cutler also served in a number of posts in Africa and in Korea and Vietnam, serving more than 30 years in the Foreign Service. Next call comes to us from Tulsa, Oklahoma. Good morning.
Good morning. My question is in regard to the Gulf War and the Iraqi invasion of Kuwait. And I wanted to know, since the United States is basically the only beneficiary of that war, since it didn't really help the Iraqis, Kuwaitis, nor the Saudis, some people believe that Saddam Hussein was actually fooled into invading Kuwait so the United States can destroy his army and establish a very strong military presence in the region.
Yes, I've heard that theory from time to time, that actually in some way we conspired so that we could keep a military presence there. Frankly, I reject it totally. We were not the only ones who benefited from the Gulf War. I mean, ask any Kuwaiti who was occupied and who was liberated by the international force that went in there. Ask the Saudis. Ask most people in that area. Because this was an outright act of aggression, and we had the UN involved, and I think it was a very successful operation. Now, one could argue whether or not we should have gone all the way to Baghdad. That's another question altogether. But certainly the idea that in some way we conspired to foment this attack on Kuwait so that we could increase our military presence, I think is far-fetched, to put it mildly.
Next call, Charlotte, North Carolina. Good morning.
Good morning. I have one quick question. Do you think that there are troops in Saudi Arabia to protect the royal family from the fanatics in Saudi Arabia? If we pulled out, would there be a risk of the royal family being overthrown from the fanatics actually in the country?
Well, that's an interesting question too. I really don't think so. And the same kind of question could be asked about the Gulf War. Was our primary motivation to preserve the current government in Saudi Arabia and protect it? And in fact, we had our own self-interest very much involved, and it relates very much to the flow of oil to the rest of the world. No, I don't think by any means that our troops are there to protect the royal family from the fanatics. We certainly would like to see a stable Saudi Arabia. So we share that. We share that interest with the government, and we certainly oppose any kind of a radical upheaval. What we do want to see is an opening up, a gradual, shall we say, a gradual move toward greater participation in all the governments in that area, including Saudi Arabia, because we believe that in the long run, stability really involves participation in the government. You look around the world, and that, call it democracy if you will, that has proven to be, in the long run, probably the best way to assure a stable area.
We are again focusing on Saudi Arabia. Secretary Rumsfeld making his first of a four-nation tour that will wrap up tomorrow. yesterday speaking in the country in which he met with the Saudi royal family, quoted as saying that the problem will not be solved by a single country and will require intelligence sharing and cooperation from people all over the globe, calling it a long-term effort to defeat international terrorism. Next call is from Oceanside, California. Go ahead, caller.
Yes, I have one comment replying to the gentleman who indicated that C-SPAN was a propaganda organization for the government. C-SPAN is the shining light from a standpoint of offering more than what the government puts out. They're the only news channel that, at least in my opinion, seems to give both sides. They also air some of the European channels, which give a completely different aspect and a much different aspect to the World Trade Center situation than the normal news channels do. And I do have one question, which is, does Mr. Cutler think that an administration less closely tied to the oil industry would handle this situation any differently?
Thanks, caller.
No, I don't think so. I think our relationship with Saudi Arabia, it's 50 years old now, and it's gone through one administration after another, and it's been pretty constant. It's been pretty constant. We want stability in that area, and we share that with the Saudi government, and there have been different kings during this long relationship. We have a mutual interest in seeing that what I call the predators of the area, be it Saddam Hussein's or others, don't disrupt this stability. We want to see Saudi Arabia progress and gradually evolve from the standpoint of greater participation. But from the standpoint that this is simply a matter of our own oil interests, of our companies, no. However, let me say that Saudi Arabia will always be important to us, critically important to us, so long as we are so dependent upon oil. I mean, we all have our cars, SUVs, and so on, and so as long as that's such an important part of way of American life, then we are going to have to realize that resources around the world, and oil, in this case Saudi Arabia, are going to remain vitally important to us.
We'll have
That's another whole issue that could be a good program.
We'll have you come on back. About a minute left for San Jose. Quick question.
Good morning, Mr. Ambassador, and thank you for taking my call. Is it true that one of the main reasons, if not the main reason, for the existence of bin Laden and others like him, in other words, the existence of terrorism in the Middle East, is the Israeli occupation of Palestine?
Let me stop you there. Thanks for the call.
That certainly is a part of the reaction that we're seeing in the Middle East. And as you know, the peace process stopped about a year ago. There's been tragic violence. This affects the attitudes of people in the Middle East, and particularly their concern about American policy being more balanced. Whether it's a motivating factor for Osama bin Laden, as I said, is another matter. But certainly it is part of the mix, and something we're going to have to pay attention to.
And finally, very quickly, our relationship right now with Saudi Arabia, you would describe as what?
Close. Close, good. It's really been a constant. We do have our differences, WTO, and things like that. Of course we do. But the dialogue is good, and we have a new ambassador who's to arrive in a few days.
Walter Cutler, thank you very much, serving as the U.S. Ambassador to Saudi Arabia during the 1980s. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.